Right. So we are very, very privileged to have with us here today a professional storyteller who makes it her career to tell stories about companies and people's lives. And welcome, Sass Huntwood. And maybe I'll hand over to you to just quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and how you came to be doing this.
Thank you so much, Elmarie, and thank you for inviting me today. It's been wonderful to see the last few days and today. Yes, my name is Sass. I'm based in the UK. You can probably tell by my accent. And I am a storyteller, and I love stories. I'm very passionate about people telling their stories and sharing their stories. People often are very humble, and they say, what's unique and special about my story and remarkable? But because as human beings, we are unique and remarkable, therefore your story is. So that is my mission, is for people to share their stories. So we work with people to create storybooks of their lives or unique events and help with organizations to share their unique story as well with the world.
How did you, just before you tell your story, the story of Day 4, says, how did you get to do this? I mean, what you say you love telling people stories. What prepares a person to be able to do this kind of job?
A few things. Just a love of hearing stories and telling stories. My daughter, I have a 9-year-old daughter. We published. We had a children's book published last year, and that was an amazing process. I have been involved in storytelling when we set up a training company 6 years ago. I wanted us, people to be able to tell their story. So it's practice, it's going out there and listening to stories, reading, consuming information, hearing other people's stories, and then learning how to construct a story.
Would you say that it's something that's important in the corporate world as well?
I think it's vital in the corporate world. I think what irritates me more than anything, when you go to someone's About Us page of their website, or they talk about the company, they don't put their personal spin on it. There's not the imagination, the innovation, the personality. They use lots of corporate words. And that's not about connecting. And also to connect with a brand or an organization and the people in it, we have to connect with the individuals.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, storytelling is vital within an organization and externally.
Oh no, and it's quite interesting because I think it also taps into the emotional side of people. We're all people at the end of the day. Nothing that we do doesn't have some kind of a personal connection. And I think sometimes people can just relate so much better to a story than they can relate to the hard facts, right? So yeah, that's very interesting. And as this is Day 4 of our conference, where we're talking about the future of skills, maybe this is something that I don't think enough attention is being paid to this in children's education and at university. Do you think that children are being adequately prepared to tell stories?
I'd have to agree with you that I don't think they are, Elmarie. I don't think the education system per se, there's a lot of skill sets and a lot of discussions that came out of today talking about the future of education. And I know you had a future of schools as well day. Yeah, absolutely. I think storytelling is a critical skill. The ability to communicate with others. We connect through storytelling. Yeah. You go back 30,000 years ago, we connected. That's how we told morals, educated, entertained, and warned people about dangers. We connect with people through stories. So I think it's definitely a skill set that we need now, but also for the future.
Yeah. Well, that's very exciting. So I think we are all very excited to listen to you tell the story of Day 4, and also for people to also know, and we can maybe catch up on this at the end, but this is a service that you offer as well. And I, for one, am definitely going to be one of your first clients. So thank you to being with us today, and I'm going to hand over to you now, Sass, to tell us the story of Day 4, which is the future of skills.
Thanks, Elmarie. Thank you. So today, I want to take you on a journey into the future, where we need to have certain amount of superpowers. these superpowers or skills that we need, whether it's our future generations coming up behind us or ourselves in the future. So let me take you on that time warp. So we had some amazing speakers today, and if I was to identify some superpowers each of them had, we kicked off with Lina, and for me, her superhero power would be hope. The ability to install hope in future generations. That's an amazing superpower. We had Robin, and for me, that's positivity and enthusiasm. What amazing superpowers that would be, to install a positivity, enthusiasm in the future. We had Dr. Sue, and emotional intelligence for me would be her superpower. The ability to tap into our emotional intelligence and enhance that for the future generations. We then had V.S. Ravi, and for me, his superhero power would be thinking. The ability to install critical thinking in each and every one of us for the future. Then Amanda, for me, would be the superhero power for Amanda Brock would be technology. The ability to harness technology for the future. Then we had Natalie Turner, and for me, Natalie had two superhero powers. It was innovation and imagination. The ability to tap into us, using that superhero power, tap into our imaginative side of our brains to really install and drive innovation. And then finally, John. For me, John would have the power of time, the ability to freeze time, to pause it, to slow it down. What an amazing superpower that would be. So if we were to take all those superpowers together and look at cumulative, what amazing amount of future skills we would have. So let's look at each of our superheroes in turn. Now we had Lina, and she talked about the talent evolution in the age of machines. And I have to say, she and her organization totally embodies what it is to embrace the future of skills. For me, what they're doing is really looking at the future and those future generations and skill sets. She talked about the two giants on the stage, digital transformation and COVID. And I love the way that she addressed COVID and said there's been an increase in digital transformation because of the global pandemic. And she talked about 5 steps. And I love a model when there's some steps. And she talked about the vision, having a vision, as an organization having a vision when it comes to digital transformation. Secondly, she talked about communication. Thirdly, there was culture. The fourth was processes. And then fifth was technology. So embracing those 5 steps as we transform digitally. I liked her description about digital literacy. It's a word I haven't come across before. And I liked the fact she put its awareness and the ability to use it to create something. Very simple, but very impactful statement. And then she discussed about those future skills. What do we need to have going forward? Well, we need to be digitally savvy. I have a 92-year-old granddad who I would say is pretty digitally savvy, probably even more so than me. He has more technology than I possibly have in our house. That ability to be digitally savvy. Communication and collaboration being critical skill sets going forward. And we've seen that this week in the networking and the discussions going on through the conference. Understanding processes, very important. Being able to lead from the front. Being a lifelong learner, and that touches on based on a lot of the themes that we've had this week. The ability to continuously learn and having the right mindset. That's something that came up with a couple of the talks today, having that right mindset. And finally, she talked about, she left us with a question. Was this about the two giants or about us as humans? I'll leave you with that little thought. We then moved on to Robin, and I loved his power of the mindset, finding purpose through passion. That's phenomenal. And really what I liked about it is because he installed it into 3 anchors: happiness, health, and financial. And he talked about moving from a fixed mindset to an open, more growth mindset. And the question he asked us was, what is more? And I think as children, they do that. They're always constantly questioning, what is more? They don't have that fixed mindset that we as almost as adults, as grown-ups, we tend to have. he says we use this to find our purpose and our vision. And he spends a lot of time talking about purpose and vision, which I think is so critical for the future and looking at what skill sets we want to enhance. He touched on failure, and actually this came up a few times I've seen this week. The ability to fail as quickly and as much as possible, as children do it time and time again, learning from our failures and moving onwards. He talked about if you are on a personal development journey, and a lot of people this week will be on a personal development journey. Where do I start? Well, 2 top tips he gave us was read and watch. You know, consume as much information as we can and get into the mind of other people. Get into their heads. I call it modeling the masters. Then that's great, we're on a journey, and some people this week might be on that journey, but how do I sustain it? He talked about working, testing, and reflecting, which underpinned by determination and belief. If you found your purpose, if you found your vision, that's great, but how do I sustain it? Well, it's determination, persistence, perseverance, but also the belief in the vision that you have. And he left us with one quote, which was, live your life on your terms. I love that quote. Then Dr. Sue McNamara talked about the why of emotional intelligence. And I love this. And she defined it in a unique and easy to understand kind of why. For someone like me, who's quite simple, she said, smarter with your feelings. Smarter with your feelings. I love that. Because it's using IQ and EQ to make better choices and decisions. And what it reminded me of previous leaders, managers that you might have been, I've been managed before. They might have been very experienced. You might say they're quite intelligent, but were they really high emotional intelligence? And I have to argue they probably weren't. She discussed again the global pandemic came up as you expected it to, and likened it to a saber-toothed tiger. I love that vision of being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And how we react to that fight, flight, or freeze. I don't know what I would do faced with a saber-toothed tiger. And she talks about we react and generate emotions to deal with that threat. We react in a normal pattern to assess what's going on around us and create a pathway forward. And there's 3 areas she went into a lot of detail about, which was self-awareness, self-management, and self-direction. And she left us actually with that question, if we've made a decision in the past, were we aware of it? Were we aware of our self-management and our self-direction? And as leaders, I thought it was particularly interesting saying putting people at the center of your decision-making. In order to create a high-performing organization, we need to put people at the center. We then moved on to Mr. Ravi, and he talked about foresight leadership and what skills we need in the age of pandemic, crisis, uncertainty, and digital disruption. To think for yourself, Ravi said, is a key characteristic to become a leader, that ability to think for yourself, hence why his superpower is thinking, critical thinking. He touched on other elements I thought was really interesting to become a great leader, and it's something that I'm always looking to do, develop myself as a leader. Grit, I love that word, grit, resilience, realistic optimism, future thinking, being approachable, not to also be accountable and adaptable. I think as leaders, we have to also maintain ourselves and be accountable to our team, being assertive and also aggressive. However, overall, what I liked, what he said was leaders have to choose to become a great leader. It's a choice. And I'll leave you with a quote. He said, our reluctance to reinvent ourselves is the greatest threat we face. It's a fantastic, that is a great, great quote. One I will definitely take forward. And he gave us one last top tip, which is finding a safe place, safe ground to critically think, to be able to brainstorm and talk to other people, finding that safe place to critically think. Then we moved on to Amanda, and Amanda talked about opening the door to the future with open technology. And for someone who considers themselves a little bit of tech savvy, gosh, I learned a lot from her. She had an amazing ability to describe, the difference between open source software, hardware, data, and talked about the natural evolution of software and how it's now in the hands of the many. And I think what reaffirmed for me was the coronavirus has heightened our awareness of how apps work and what permissions we give over to hand our data over, how it's used. I know especially in the UK, it's front page news all the time. Interesting to see what the future looks like, that maybe there will be some apps that come along that help us control our data, you know, understand more about how we manage that data that we have given permission to use. And because of what's happened, the barriers have been removed, and in turn, we've got innovation. And I thought it was very interesting in the interview when you talked about, Anne-Marie, yourself, and they talked about cities of the future, and how I didn't realize that obviously open hardware and open source software can reduce the hardware need. So we reduce our servers, we reduce our power consumption, and reduce the carbon emissions. That was fascinating. I had never made that link before. And then she talked about the decentralization, potential decentralization because of open source software and hardware. And finally, she touched on digital inclusion and accessibility. And as a parent myself, with a 9-year-old, and I also have done a lot of work in countries such as Kenya and Tanzania, it was wonderful to look at how do we get children accessible, how do we get them access to technology? What feature skills do they need? How can we make technology work for us rather than us work for technology? You know, such as the open source payment options to help build communities in Tanzania. We then moved on to Natalie Turner, the human side of innovation, and she has created a fantastic model, you know, the 6 I's. And she talked about how do we, when she identified ideas, and we create ideas as human beings, but why do they stop? Why do they stop and never progress? It's because the barriers are put up by us humans. How do we kind of push past those barriers? So she looked at 6 areas. There was identify, ignite, which is that spark, that creativity, investigate, invest, implement, and improve. And I love the fact it all linked back to purpose, you know, the why are we doing this in the first place? And the 2 words that really sprung to mind through her talk was opportunity and possibility. Really making a difference using our imagination, tapping into that side of the brain that as older we get, we tend to switch off. And providing that and tapping into that imagination brings out the innovation. It's creating those value out of the ideas that is going to create an impact in the future. And then finally, we had John Duran talking about harnessing your network and relationship currency to thrive in a world of busy. Now, we can all say we're very busy. And I love the fact he started saying we are human beings and not human doings. And that's why he has the superhero power of being able to freeze time, the ability to pause. He talked about the awareness of our attention and our energy. And I love the fact he gave us a top tip, wiggling your toes to bring attention back to the now. I'm going to use that going forward. He used an acronym called MEDS, which was mindfulness, exercise, diet, and sleep. Really slowing down so you can achieve more. And one thing I thought was very interesting was the micro breaks, taking micro breaks throughout the day. Don't be afraid to take those 5-10 minute breaks, especially at the moment when the lines are blurred between our work and personal life. We're not made to be always on. And because we have back-to-back Zoom calls, we're constantly looking at a 2D screen now. When do you ever take your micro breaks? And finally, the last thing you talked about was acting under the influence of emotions, which brings us back to what Dr. Sue was saying about AUI, acting under the influence of emotions. The emotions will impact ultimately our decisions. So in summary, I'd like to use one keyword I think that sums up the whole day, which would be optimism. Strategic and realistic optimism. Nicholas Butler said that optimism is essential to achievement, but it's also the foundation of courage and true progress. And if we're to embrace a future of skills for the next generation and our generation and future generations, then we need to encourage courage, and true progress. Thank you very much.